Hi there, welcome or welcome back to Snacks and Stacks. I like to talk about books, TV shows, and movies, and today we're going to talk about Parable of the Sower. At first I wasn't going to do a reading vlog about this and just do more of like a recap video, as this is one of the 10 books out of my norm that I, as a fantasy and romance reader, don't normally pick up, even though it is in the fantasy world, because it's dystopian. It's classified as a classic. It's also been a book that I've been avoiding because I've heard that it's very bleak and grim and that it is hard to read, especially since the time period of this book is 2024 to 2020. Maybe I just stopped where it's 2026, so it's almost like a weird foreboding feeling. So yeah, I wasn't going to do a reading vlog, but as I'm reading, I just read one of probably my favorite chapters. I probably just read one of my favorite chapters, and I wouldn't say of all time, but it was a chapter that made me feel a certain way. And I was like, I think I need to make this into a reading vlog. So bear with me. I have been 100 pages in, and I found the world to be, like people say, it's very bleak. It's really hard to swallow at times, as there are things going on. I've noted with, you can't really tell because all the colors are similar, but I've noticed some of these spaces where I feel like it's talking about now. It's talking about things that we talk about. So what is Parable of the Sower about? If you are new to this story and you have no idea, this is a book about 15-year-old Lauren. She suffers from hyper empathy, so she can see someone in pain and then feel the pain herself. And this is somewhat of a secret. It's mostly just her family that knows this, and she lives in a society where the climate and the politics of the world has changed to a point where water costs more than gasoline, and nobody even has money for gasoline, right? Like, everyone is riding bicycles, they arm themselves to protect themselves. She particularly lives in a walled-in neighborhood for safety, and she doesn't even feel like they are that rich, but there are people who live on the outside who are mad about the fact that there are people in these walled neighborhoods and they feel like it's unfair. She lives in California. We've gotten to the point where there's so much upheaval in the world, but specifically in the United States on the West Coast. And we don't know too much about what else is going on in other states. We just know a couple of little things at this point, and we have found out that if they try to go north into Oregon, Washington, Canada, they probably won't make it. Her father makes it sound like it's impossible. Her father is a preacher as well. Obviously, this vlog will not be spoiler free after this moment, as I really just want to talk about things that I find fascinating about this book, and I can't do that without spoilers. So if you'd like to read this book and come back and we can discuss some of these points together, that would be amazing. But spoilers will be starting now. So the chapter that I really enjoyed was chapter 6. This is the part where Lauren has just confided in her friend Joanne that she thinks that the world is going to shit and we really need to prepare ourselves. She tells her about how, she needs to learn how to survive outside the walls in case something happens. To me, she is only 15 years old, 1 year older than my son, which makes it hard to think that she is even thinking about these things. I think the more you read about her, the more you understand that she's already taking college courses. So she's obviously already very much in tune to what is happening in her little world, and she can very much see patterns and is recognizing the dangers of what is happening. To preface this, I have a very big admiration and love for father-daughter scenes. So this is probably why I also really love this chapter. But this chapter is where her dad comes to her and has this conversation with her about how she is scaring people and how she's doing it basically wrong, right? And she is kind of coming at it from a 15-year-old's point of view, saying, Dad, can't you see, you're just gonna make, everybody needs to be more prepared. Nobody understands what's going on. As a teenager does, they just think they know everything. And he's like, I know where you're coming from, And I think this chapter in itself, one, so important in the book to establish these two characters and their relationship, which definitely is important because in the very first sentence, she's talking of the whole book. She's talking about how tomorrow is my birthday and my father's birthday. And so this relationship is very important to her, as this is her journals. And so we go through to this spot where they are talking to each other. And as a teenager, she thinks she knows everything, which I know they do think that. And as a father, he is so patient with her, and he is being just so nice and trying to explain to her how to convey your ideas. And I marked this because I just love it so much. So some context, right? He's trying to make her promise to stop scaring people, and she won't promise it. And instead she asks, why? Favorite teenage word, why? He says, because you don't have any idea what you're doing, he said. He frowned and rubbed his forehead. When he spoke again, the edge went out of his voice. It's better to teach people than to scare them, Lauren. If you scare them and nothing happens, they lose their fear and you lose some of your authority with them. It's harder to scare them a second time, harder to teach them, harder to win back their trust. Best to begin by teaching. And I think that is something that we see a lot in our world today. I think that everyone's trying to scare one another, right? I'm scaring you by telling you all these bad things are going to happen. And as the oppositions, especially in America right now, as everyone on each side just start trying to scare each other with tactics, we're just pushing each other further and further away from inevitably what is the truth. And the truth is in the middle. The truth is becoming hazy because nobody's actually teaching one another anything at this point. We're getting to the point where we're just yelling at each other. And nobody's going to listen to you when you're yelling. He says that she should start by teaching her kindergartners, because in this book, her stepmother is basically like the neighborhood teacher. And so she gets to teach the kindergartners. There's something about this chapter and the way he is mentoring her, advising her, coaching her, whatever you want to say, parenting her, by giving her this suggestion, by telling her that what you're doing, the way you're doing it, it's not going to help, right? In my experience with all these people. And what I really enjoyed about this was when he says there are always people who won't do anything, right? Because she's like, we need to have emergency packs. And so I think this chapter so perfectly conveys this relationship between a parent and a teenager. And as that is something I relate to very much, I found it to be very powerful. Then Lauren says, none of this is fast enough. Wow. I found that to be so amazing because that's how I feel, right? Even as a 35-year-old, I relate to this teenager because as I'm looking at stuff on my phone, I'm thinking change is not fast enough. None of this is fast enough. There's this inherent need inside me, right? Because I'm the dad in this is like in his 50s. There's this need inside me for things to move faster, for things to happen, for change to happen. And I think that a lot of us feel this need and want for change. And we're getting to a point where we're arguing and we're yelling and we're fear-mongering because it's not fast enough. This slow teaching of teaching other people does not feel enough. But then at the very end of this entry, he also says, come, I have to show you where some things are buried. Because one of the things that she suggested to her friend was to start burying money so that, the thieves can't find it. So this almost feels like a rite of passage. Like, she is getting to the point where she is seeing things and recognizing these patterns. It's time to loop her into this adulthood, into this reality that we live in. And so this whole entry just felt so important to me. And later on, she is then staying up and listening to the conversations between her father and her stepmother. And there are things that are also very important. Corey, the stepmom, is saying, I don't care about them. It's you I'm worried about, to the dad. And this to me is so much of like dialogue between my husband and I when we talk about all the things happening in the United States. And I say something like, wouldn't you be so proud to be married to someone who defended someone else? And his response was, absolutely not. I would be so pissed off because you put your life in danger for someone I don't know or care about, but I obviously know and care about you. And to me, when he said that, I was, of course, a little bit like, right? Because it can be hard to understand that. But it is a true thing that happens in all of our minds and brains and all the things that is happening right now. And so she ends the chapter with, Corey is right, but it doesn't matter. Dad is right, but he doesn't go far enough. God is changing. In the end, God prevails. So another thing about this book that I thought I wasn't going to like was that she mentioned God a lot, but it's not the God that everybody else knows. She is saying God is change. Change is inevitable. And so, yeah, I just found that whole chapter to be so good, and I wanted to sit down and talk it out and I don't know, I just needed to record myself talking about it, and as a way to remind myself how much I enjoyed it. So this book has been very good so far. It's a hard book to read, but it's very good. And there are things in here that I've marked that reminds me so much of what's going on now. And I'm hoping by the end, maybe there's a little bit of an answer to help us teach others what is happening and why it's happening. I think that a lot of us are trying really hard to teach in a way that's not getting to the other side's heads. And one of the most important things to do in these moments, instead of yelling out into the void, is to try to understand, even though it can be very hard to. And so that's kind of what I'm getting from the book so far and why I'm enjoying it. So I'm 100 pages in. I'm hoping to finish this book by the end of the month. And I will clock back in or come back on here next time I read something very cool or very interesting, hopefully. Or it'll be the end. I don't know. I'll see you guys in the next clip. Bye.
There's no such thing as impromptu. Everything is too short. Good morning. I'm 10%. I have 10% left of Parable of a Sower. And my hand looks so big. I'm sorry if you can hear the dogs walking around. I have about 10% left of Parable of a Sower, and I was going to just finish it before I started recording, but I did a mistake this morning of reading reviews. I saw this review, and it was talking about how the main character, Lauren, is 18, and if somebody that was 18 years old was spouting this stuff about Earthseed and came up to them, they would totally dismiss them. And I think that is an interesting take. In fact, my copy has a foreword from N.K. Jemisin, which I've never read a book from her, even though I want to. And I think that she even talks about how in her 20s, as she read this book, she was like, Lauren is like 15 to 18. What is she talking about? And as she gets older, she keeps rereading the book and it keeps getting better. This is obviously my first time reading it. But I can totally see what she means, because I have this immediate reaction to Lauren being young and being like, what do you know? And I think that we think that way a lot, even about our own children. But I think dismissing young people is one of the problems of society today. We like to think that young people are naive and young, and it's because they haven't gone through the toils of life and adulthood. And I think young people recognize that that toil, that survival mentality that we all might have, and that just like this lifestyle that we have slowly allowed ourselves to be a part of, and to allow the life that's going on to continue to happen to us, because that's life, that's how it goes. That mentality and that lack of naivete or invention is why we continue to struggle the same as our ancestors, as our parents. This like inability to think outside of society and the societal norms that have literally been created. So reading Parable of the Sower after reading Erased is actually a very interesting order, because all these things that we think are societal norms, things that people that are older get and younger people don't get, all these things is manufactured. It's made by a group of white male politicians mostly, but white male who want to keep in power and want to extend this idea of patriarchy. And so I think what Octavia Butler might be doing, obviously I don't know for sure, is that she might be telling us, hey, young people's ideas, as extreme as they may be, as naive as they may be, should not be discounted, right? Because this young person, obviously I haven't gotten to the end of the book yet, but she has accumulated a following just by reading her verses and things that she finds that she has discovered. And I think young people get dismissed a lot because they haven't been systemized or assimilated to this way of living that we all at one point also did not necessarily, probably, right? I can't say we all, actually. Let's go back. We've all kind of assimilated to a way of life that we may not understand has been formed and forced upon us. I remember thinking, and still think, that life is so unfair, right? There's like injustices, but there's nothing to do about it. When I was younger, I had this very like fire within me to like make things better, which is probably why I read certain books and then get enraged and then realize that change can't happen as quickly, and then I get frustrated. I think that's what I like about this book, is that for a while I was thinking, why did she pick such a young person to be the main focus of this book? And I think that is why. But yes, I have 10% left. I should be finishing it up within this week, and I will hop on here and let you know what I think of it. So far, I think it's about a 4-star read for me. Entertainment is pretty like big when it comes to 5-star reads, and it's not that I don't find it entertaining. Entertaining is not the word. I do find it well written, and I think the things happening in it are harsh and difficult to read, and so that's why it's taking me longer. But it's not a 5-star read so far, just because there's things in it that I find are not to my taste, not that it's bad writing or anything. Hello. I have finished. This is easily a 4-star book. It might even be 4.5. I'm overthinking some parts of it, right? And that, I think, makes it harder. Also, this book is extremely bleak. There's a lot of stuff in here
that is difficult, and our main character goes through some difficult times as well, but not in a way that where like every difficult thing happens to just our main character, which is another rant for another time. What I liked about Parable of the Sower, I liked the kind of journal entry writing where we have Lauren writing in journal entries. This book spans like 3 years, so she's definitely not writing in it all the time, so we don't see like slice of life everyday things. We mostly just see very big events happening. What I also liked about it is the main character, Lauren, she shows a lot of growth throughout the book, and I also like that she's exploring Earthseed, which is this kind of religion that she finds herself discovering. And it's an interesting way to look at almost like a coping mechanism to better understand all the terrible things that's happening in her world. Another thing I really like about this book is that it technically takes place right now. So this book was written in 1993, which people are calling this a classic, which is part of, outside my norm, I was picking out books that were classified as classics. So I'm sure this is like a newer classic since I was alive in 1993. But I will say that it does not feel like a classic. The writing style is very easy to read. The content is not easy to read, but the writing style it's like fluid. It feels really good. I'm definitely going to read more Octavia Butler books. I think part of the reason why I was kind of against trying this book at first was because I've heard it's very bleak and that it's just like a hard world to put yourself in. And for that, I would say it's actually not that. And it's not that it's not that bad. It is bad, but there are books that have more trauma. I've heard people call it like trauma porn than this. This is just like everything has gone to shit, not just this one main character is going through it, right? So I really like that. It sounds weird to say. I really like that. But I like those types of stories better, and I found it really interesting to compare this to Earth Abides, which I'll put the cover here, another kind of climate crisis dystopian book. That one is more of a classic because it was written a lot earlier. And that one, we are really kind of researching and looking at what happens if a majority of people die. This one, we're looking at the earth is dying and then people are going kind of crazy. So this is kind of where I can talk more about the things I didn't like about the book that kind of knocked it down to more of a 4-star for me. I would have loved to known more about what happened, like how did this happen, right? Was there a turning point? Was there something that happened to make these such a big leap from where we are to this? Because in the book we have older people who still trust the police and stuff like that. So I feel like if that is the case, then where did it go wrong? Another thing, this is me being so nitpicky, it's ridiculous, but they talk a lot about owning land, right? The reason why Lauren's family is richer than others and they have this gated community is because they own the house, they own the land. And to me, that is very interesting how that still works, because we all know that history has shown that people will go to war over land and religion, and for them to still be able to own land seems really interesting to me when the government has gone to shit, because how do you prove that you own this land? And later on in the book, we have them traveling and kind of that this comes up again, like having a plot of land. And so for me, I'm like, well, how does that even happen if we have so much discourse? It's so confusing. Like, we don't even go to schools anymore. Like, I don't see how that could happen. The last thing I probably don't like as much is Lauren is a hyper empathetic person. She basically, her mom was like taking these drugs when she had her, so when she was born, she has this condition called hyperempathy. When she sees someone get hurt, she then feels hurt as well. It does talk about it quite a bit, but I wish there was more explanation and more as to like how it really affects her. It's almost like in the beginning it affects her, and then the end of the book it affects her, but in the middle, for a while there, I almost forgot that she had this condition because it doesn't really show up. I wonder if there's other symptoms of other drugs, or if it's just this one drug. So that's another thing where I felt like the world building wasn't giving me all the pieces that I needed. But I might just be like one of those people that like more things spelled out. Oh, I forgot. One more thing. The Earthseed verses. So I think it's cool that she has kind of discovered this new religion and it's using it as a coping mechanism. I think that the Earthseed religion is a little out there. But the point of the community of Earthseed is to then go live in space, which sounds a little ridiculous, but it does sound a little cultish. So yeah, I think for someone like myself who is more agnostic, if anything, the kind of more heavy religious talk is interesting, but not something that I like to read. So that is why. I think that is all my points of why this is not like a 5-star book for me, but it's still 4 stars. It's still really good. I highly recommend it. I think everyone should read it. Let me know if you've read this, what you think. And that's all for today. Happy reading, happy snacking, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.